The Capitol building is in Richmond, the capital of Virginia. It's where the state legislature meets. The legislative branch of government is the branch that makes the laws, so this is where Virginia laws are made. On our way to the Capitol building, we had a discussion about the difference between capital and capital. Capital with an A has many different meanings. It can mean the city where the government meets in a state, like Richmond. It can also be capital resources, like money. It can mean capital letters, and it can even mean the top of columns, like Doric, Ionic, or Corinthian. But the other kind of capital always means a building. A good way to help you remember it is this capital has an O in it, and the O can remind you of an office building. But the Capitol building in Richmond didn't always look like this, and in fact, Richmond wasn't always the capital city of Virginia. Brad and Alfonso finally made it to the top of the Capitol building after running up all those steps. Let's see what they had to say about it.
Hey boys and girls, Alfonso here.
And this is Brad.
We finally made it to the top of the Capitol building. I gotta tell you, this is such an awesome place.
Did you know that this became the capital of Virginia in 1780? The first two capitals, the first one was Jamestown and then Williamsburg, and then finally right here in Richmond. The capital of the Confederacy, the capital of our state. Come on, let's check it out.
Unbelievable, come on.
Like Brad said, our first capital was in Jamestown. The House of Burgesses met in the Jamestown Church in 1619. But after several buildings burned down, they decided to move the capital to Williamsburg in 1699. Here's the Capitol building in Williamsburg. But the Capitol in Williamsburg burned down as well. So in 1780, they moved the capital to where it is today, Richmond. And luckily it survived the burning of Richmond after the Civil War. Hello boys and girls, maybe you noticed outside the Capitol building that there's columns. Now did you notice what was at the top of the columns? What kind of, was it Ionic, Doric, or Corinthian? And if you said Ionic, you're correct. Good job. So why does the Capitol building look like Greek and Roman temples? Well, to answer that question, we have to leave the state of Virginia and go across the Atlantic Ocean to the continent of Europe. Thomas Jefferson lived in France for a while as an ambassador, and while he was there, he saw an old Roman temple. He thought it looked pretty cool. Plus, he really believed in the democracy of the Greeks and the republican form of government of the Romans. So, when the General Assembly asked him to help them design the Capitol building, he copied the plans of this Roman temple. Here's the way the Capitol looked when Jefferson first built it. You can see the similarities. Of course, Richmond looked a lot different in 1788 when the Capitol was finally finished. As you can see, Richmond's kind of like a small town, but it grew over the years, and by the 1800s it was a city. This photograph shows what the Capitol building looked like during the Civil War times. After the Civil War, Richmond was burned and many buildings were damaged, but as you can see, the Capitol building survived the fire. And there it is in another Civil War photograph from 1865. In 1906, the front steps and the two side wings were added to the Capitol. And now here's how it looks today. Home of the General Assembly. Let's learn more about it.
And just like the first legislature in the New World, that was called the General Assembly. The House of Representatives and the Senate today, still in Virginia, is also called the General Assembly.
Like Brad said, the General Assembly is made of two parts. The first is the Senate, which is made up of representatives from 40 districts in Virginia. Let's go check out the Senate chamber.
Boys and girls, here we are in the Senate chambers. Awesome place where the laws are made, proposed. This is just an unbelievable place to be right now. We're going to take you on a little tour.
Come to order! That's what they might say in the Senate chambers, which is the branch of government that makes the laws for Virginia.
There are 40 senators that represent the state of Virginia. That means there's 40 voting districts, and your parents and anybody above the age of 18 can go and vote for those representatives. Remember, democracy is ruled by the people, so the voters vote for their representatives, which would come here. When it comes time for a senator to vote on a law or a bill, they would use this touchscreen machine, no more raising your hand and all that other stuff. So we get instant tallies on all their votes. They can figure out who voted, who didn't vote, and how each person voted.
Boys and girls, these are the 40 current senators, as you can see, when they vote, their voting preference, whether it be yay or nay, will be displayed up here. That'll count the votes to see whether something passes or does not pass.
I'm sitting in the big seat in the Virginia Senate. Right here in this seat is where the lieutenant governor would sit during Senate meetings. And the lieutenant governor usually does not vote, but he is the all-important vote if there's a tie. So if we have a 20-20 vote, it's up to the lieutenant governor to decide whether the bill passes or doesn't pass.
Next stop, the other side of the Capitol building, the House of Delegates. This is where representatives from 100 districts across Virginia meet to make laws. Let's visit the House chamber.
The room behind me is the House chamber. It's very similar to the Senate chamber that we just saw, except this room is a lot larger. It's because there's 100 delegates elected to the House. They pass the same laws that the Senate does, and the Senate and the House makes up the legislative branch of Virginia government.
Unfortunately, the Virginia trekkers weren't allowed into this room, but we can give you a peek. Next, we visited the old House chamber. This is where the delegates used to meet a long time ago. One of its treasures is a silver mace covered with gold, which is carried into the House chamber at the start of its session. Court cases used to be heard here as well, and one court case in particular caused a terrible tragedy. On April 12, 1870, hundreds of people were gathered here to listen to an important case. The balcony couldn't hold their weight, and it collapsed, then crashed through the second floor, landing 40 feet below. 62 people were killed. Another interesting fact about the Capitol building is that it is home to the only statue made of George Washington from real life. The sculpture actually measured George Washington and made a plaster mold of his face so it would be realistic. And when Washington's friends saw the statue, they said it looked just like him. The statue was placed in the Capitol building in 1796 and has been there ever since. There's another statue of George Washington outside of the Capitol. It was made in 1858, right before the Civil War, so it became a custom for Confederate soldiers to get their picture taken in front of it. Here's a picture of some soldiers posing in front of the statue. Well, our tour of the Capitol building is almost over. We're going to end our visit at the governor's office.
Boys and girls, we're here at the governor's office. The governor is the top leader of Virginia. It's kind of like the president being in charge of the entire United States. The governor